I want to thank Bobby Menez and Sharon Jimenez for organizing this event, and Gina Goldman, who also played a key role in organizing getting this extraordinary crowd out, and to Bishop Juan Mendez. I'm very grateful to you for coming and for your support, and also Chris Clem, who I think you may have met before, but who's going to come up here, who you saw in the film, who was the former chief of the Border Patrol, and has been an advisor to me since I went to the border, and a very knowledgeable and wise counselor. And I'm very grateful to him for coming today, and he's going to sit up here and answer some questions. I saw that Elon Musk yesterday was talking about why he had been a lifelong Democrat since he moved to this country and got his citizenship. And he said he joined the Democratic Party and supported it for all of his life because the Democratic Party was the party of kindness. And that was the Democratic Party that I grew up in. And I think ultimately the impulse to open the border that we saw at the beginning of the Biden administration was, for most Democrats in this country, was motivated by kindness, by a humanitarian impulse, by this idea that the United States should be a welcoming country, and that it was wrong to deny access to our country to people who were fleeing oppression and fleeing difficulties in their own countries. And what I saw down there convinced me that this is not a way of demonstrating our kindness. We have created, through these open border policies, this extraordinary humanitarian crisis. And one of the things that they don't talk about in this film, the people who were coming across that night, the first 120 group of 120 were from Africa. And I didn't get a chance to question them, but we questioned everybody else in the second group. They were coming up in buses, 55 on a bus. The buses are owned and operated by the Mexican drug cartels. I expected to see many people from Latin America and Central America fleeing oppression, fleeing the drug cartels in their own country, removing their families for the sake of safety, making this incredibly perilous journey, tearing up their roots because there was something bad happening in their country that was threatening their lives. But what I saw, we only saw that whole night, two families from Latin America, one from Peru and the other from Colombia. The first group of 120 was all from Africa. The second group was mainly Asia, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tibet, Nepal, Bangladesh, Pakistan, China, India. And when we questioned them, only the two groups from Peru and Colombia said that they were here fleeing oppression. The other ones said they were here because they wanted to work. They wanted to do the things, as I said in that film, that all of us want to do in this country. But the puzzling thing to me, the extraordinary thing, is that when they crossed the border, they knew exactly what was going to happen to them. And we subsequently learned from them and others that the cartels are advertising all over the world on TikTok and YouTube. And they're showing the people exactly what's going to happen. They're saying, we will charge you give us $15,000, and we will get you into the United States. And they show them every inch of the way, the different routes they can take, the different choices, and exactly what's going to happen to them when they cross the border. The Border Patrol, which we talked to, were completely demoralized because they have been asked not to do their jobs, which is to secure our border, but simply to act as processing agents to bring new immigrants to this country. And they process them, they fingerprint them, when they come across. If they have a criminal record, they go into one line, but very few of them do. The others are then brought to the airport in Yuma, and they're given a plane ticket, if they can't afford it, or at taxpayer expense through FEMA, to any destination they want in the United States. And you can say, well, that's a kind-hearted gesture from our country. But in fact, all of the people that we talked to had gone through a nightmare. They had been exploited, extorted. Some of them had been robbed. The Peruvian family was robbed by the cartels of all their worldly possessions and their lifetime savings. They were beaten in some cases, and we heard all of these horrendous stories of rape, and you saw the people, the taxpayers of Yuma, are financing this center to treat children and women who have been raped with the drug cartels called the final payment before they cross the border. You saw in there this terrified man from Colombia trying to maintain his composure when he told me that his family, that his 18-year-old daughter and her 18-year-old friend had been separated from them by the cartels before they came across the border, and he had no idea what happened to her. And he was pleading with us, please help me find her. 85,000 children have disappeared. We don't know what became of them. And then the ones that come here are given a court date 7 years in the future by the asylum courts. So they are in our country, but they have no legal status and no capacity to work legally. So they are then exploited by unscrupulous employers who pay them $5 or $6 an hour, which is enough to get a little bit of food, but it doesn't get them off the streets. And they fall then on the social safety systems, and they are crushing those systems all over our country. And you saw Mayor Adams make this statement from the city council. They are destroying New York. And Mayor Adams, a year ago, was one of the champions of the refugee program, of the program that said everybody should be welcome. And now he's a very, very big opponent. Has been very critical. It has cost New York already $1.5 billion. They're asking for $25 billion to take care of this problem. And the refugees in New York are piled up on the sidewalks in certain parts of the city. The city is housing them now at Randall's Island on the sporting fields. So we have in New York a whole generation of kids who for 2 to 3 years, because of the lockdowns, many of these kids on scholarship trajectories, that their lives are going to be altered whether or not they get that, and they couldn't play their sports because they were locked down. Now they can't play their sports because there are refugees camped on the sporting fields in New York. Oh, it is a humanitarian catastrophe. And my father was very, very close to Cesar Chavez. He was probably my father's most beloved and important political ally. He helped my father on the last day of his life to win the state of California. And I spent the last 2 decades of his life, I spent doing a lot of work with Cesar on pesticide issues. And his family honored me in 1993 at his death by asking me to be a pallbearer in his funeral, which I did. But for during that period of time, Cesar had 2 big issues. One of those was pesticides would disproportionately injure Hispanic farm workers. The other issue was closing the border. That's right. Cesar Chavez was a huge advocate for closing the border because he saw this he saw the illegal immigration as the greatest threat to the welfare of the workers, the American workers, Chicano farm workers, who he was representing, and that this huge influx of illegal labor that could be had for pennies an hour in some cases was dampening the leverage that he had to bargain for his farm workers to get good wages and conditions. And you know, we all need to start taking a different look. We need in this country, we need high walls, but we also need wide gates. We need to make it so that immigrants have come across legally. And by the way, there have been, over the last 3 years, since the new administration came in, there have been 7 million immigrants who have crossed illegally. During that same period, only 3.1 million immigrants came in legally. And the Mexican drug cartels are running the US immigration policy now. And that's not good for our country, and it's not good for Mexico. And you know, we need to work with Mexico instead of alienating and bullying them. We need to work. We have the worst relationship now with the Mexican government that we've had during my lifetime. And we need to repair that. We need to work together as partners in dealing with this problem. And you know, one of the good news is that the issue is solvable. Everybody we talked to down there said, from the local law enforcement to the ICE to the Border Patrol, all said, and you know, Chris Clem is going to come up here and vouch for this, all said, you can shut this down immediately if you do the right thing. And that's what I'm going to do as president. I'm going to secure the border. And I'm going to make an easier, faster, simplified path to citizenship for people who are illegal. And you know, the principal barrier now is that we do not have enough asylum court judges. And that's why these immigrants are given a 7-year delay till they get a court date. And we need to get these cases. I'm going to immediately appoint sufficient asylum court judges. And we can adjudicate all of these cases on the day that the immigrants show up at our court and do it before they gain entrance to our country. As I said, 90% of the immigrants I saw come across didn't even have asylum claims. They weren't pretending to. And usually about 85% of the people who do have asylum claims, that those asylum claims are deemed not accurate. So but you need to do that adjudication at the border, because once somebody makes an asylum claim in this country, they have a right to stay here. And that's why you need to adjudicate it before they come across. And we need to close down the border, because otherwise the drug cartels are going to control it. I'll tell you very briefly one of the reforms I'm going to make. And it's a common sense reform that will be supported by both Republicans and Democrats. It should have been done long ago. I'm going to, the day that I get into office, I'm going to order the State Department to waive passport card fees at the US Post Office, so that every American, whether you're rich or poor, you can go in and get a passport card, which is a federal picture ID. This is important because there are people in this country, particularly poorer neighborhoods and urban areas where people where people are elderly, they have lapsed driver's license, or they've never had a driver's license because they don't drive. And for those people, if you do not have a government-issued picture ID, you are a second-class citizen in this country. You cannot open a bank account. You cannot stay a night in a hotel. You cannot board an airplane. You cannot go visit your children at school. And when you show up at the voting booth, this has caused a huge friction between Republicans and Democrats who say, why aren't you demanding ID? And the Democrats are, well, many of our constituents are too poor to afford their ID. So it's unfair, you're disenfranchising them by demanding it. Well, the solution is to make sure they all have IDs, and this is not mandatory IDs. I'm against that. And once you do that, it solves so many problems that are causing frictions between the parties. For one, everybody went, and this is why Andy Young, the biggest civil rights leaders in this country, Al Sharpton, Andy Young, many others, support this proposal. Because if you give everybody in this country, make sure that they have access to a free federal government-issued picture ID, the issue about demanding an ID at the voting booth goes away. And everybody has to show that ID before they vote. And it reassures Republicans who believe the voting system is rigged, it's being rigged by Democrats, and it reassures Democrats that all of their voters will be counted because they will have that ID. It's an easy fix to this problem, but let me tell you what else it does. It is illegal in this country for an employer to hire somebody who is illegal, who has no legal status. But the employers get away with it because the enforcement of that law allows them to accept a Social Security card. The Social Security card has no picture on it. It's easily fabricated, and it's handed for hand to hand, and it's a fiction. For example, in New York, construction firms in New York all know that if somebody who shows that Social Security is almost certainly illegal, and yet that's all they need to do. They need to just check the box, and then they can pay them a very low wage, $10 or $12 an hour or less, because they know they're illegal. And then that company can go and underbid a union shop who is paying their workers higher. So it destroys the American worker, it destroys the union movement, it destroys people who are legally in this country, their capacity to make a living. And if we make sure that everybody has the right to a federal picture ID, and then we tell employers that is the only ID that you can accept if you want to employ somebody, they must show that federal photo ID. And then if they don't do that, the employer goes to jail. How many employers do you think you would put in jail before everybody stopped doing it? And then what happens? The border issue dries up overnight because nobody wants to come to this country. This is one of the easy, common sense fixes that we should have done a long time ago that would help Democrats and Republicans in this country to find common ground. I want to talk about one other issue that as I crisscross the country and visit Hispanic communities, Latino communities, Chicano communities, that the issue of housing comes up again and again and again. I walked on the picket line several times in the recent weeks with the workers who are boycotting the Fairmont Hotel. Yeah! And God bless those workers. And I've spent time on the picket line talking to these women who are housekeepers in the hotel. The hotels are, fired a lot of them during COVID and now they're at full occupancy again, but they're not rehiring workers. They're just making their current workers go from 12 rooms to 18 rooms that they have to change. And these workers cannot afford to live in Los Angeles. The average housing price in Los Angeles, if you want to purchase a house, is $825,000. That means in order to afford a house, you need to make $212,000 a year. Well, there is not making that. And so they're living in Palmdale, they're living in Victorville, 2 hours ride. And they come here, they go drive to work on a Monday, and at 3 o'clock in the morning, and then they stay in their cars for the week because they can't afford the gas to go back and forth. And that's the life that we've made for